I'm pleased to be here today with Russ Girling, President and CEO of TC Energy Corporation. Today, Alberta is taking control of its economic destiny. We are acting decisively to create jobs, build a major pipeline, and grow our economy, all but through an important decision that we're announcing today. During a very tough time, we're launching a major project that gives Albertans a real reason for hope. Hope that we'll get through this crisis together and come out through the other side stronger than ever. Today, we're taking action that looks beyond COVID to a better future for Canada's energy industry and everyone who depends on it. The Government of Alberta is launching a partnership with TC Energy in a bold project to retake control of our province's economic destiny and put it firmly back in the hands of the women and men who own our natural resources, the people of Alberta. This is a big deal that will create thousands of jobs. It will help Alberta and Canada to recover more quickly from the brutal economic impact of the COVID-19 global recession. It will strengthen North American energy security against hostile foreign powers, and it will ensure that the Canadian oil sands, the largest single reserve on Earth, of oil within a free market democracy, will continue to be a stable, reliable, responsible source of energy for Canada, the United States, and the world. This is not a time for timid leadership. Albertans are going through a time of real adversity. We've been hit hard by the worst public health crisis in over a century, and we're doing everything within our power to limit the spread of the coronavirus and to save lives. At the same time, our economy is undergoing the largest contraction it has seen since the Great Depression, and we have seen hundreds of thousands of layoffs. On top of it all, our biggest industry has been hammered by the lowest energy prices in decades, in part because of the reckless Russian OPEC price war. We are coping with these huge challenges after 5 years of economic stagnation. So I know that all of these things, when you put them all together, can seem overwhelming to people. But please remember that we Albertans are a resilient people. We have overcome trying times in our past to go on to build one of the freest, most prosperous and generous societies on the face of the earth. Together with the national government, we are supporting families and employers facing financial stress right now. And following the pandemic, we will launch a bold economic recovery package. That plan will accelerate the diversification of Alberta's economy. But it will also ensure a future for our largest industry, because when we get through the crisis and the global economy moves back to growth, it'll be more obvious than ever that the world needs a reliable, democratic, major source of energy. But that will only happen if our energy has access to world markets. In other words, it will only happen if we get pipelines built. We cannot wait for the end of the pandemic and the global recession to act. There are steps that must be taken now to plan for and to build our future, steps that are focused on jobs, the economy, and on pipelines. Today, we are moving forward with a project that is essential to our economic future. I am pleased to announce that the Government of Alberta has finalized an agreement with Calgary-based TC Energy Corporation to invest in the completion of the Keystone XL Pipeline. The Government of Alberta is making a $1.5 billion equity investment in Keystone XL this year, along with a $6 billion loan guarantee next year. This agreement marks the culmination of 6 months of negotiations and rigorous vetting of the agreement by government officials and industry experts. I'd like to thank in particular my Chief of Staff, Jamie Huckabee, for his relentless work on this critical issue, and Adrian Begley of the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Corporation, and everybody who's contributed to bringing us to this day. This agreement will kickstart immediate construction on the pipeline with the goal of increasing delivery of oil sands crude to American markets by 830,000 barrels per day. Our goal is to complete the project and commission operations by the summer of 2023. We have shipper commitments in place to operate at full capacity from 2023 through to 2037. Our goal is to sell Alberta's equity stake at a profit And our expectation is that KXL will lead to higher prices as well as increased volumes of oil sands crude production, generating at least $30 billion in increased royalties over 20 years for Alberta taxpayers. Let me repeat that. We project that this project, once fully achieved, will help us to generate an additional $30 billion in revenues for Albertans to support programs like healthcare and education and to maintain our standard of life. In other words, this is not some make-work project, although it will make a lot of work. It is a solid bet that will produce a handsome return for Albertans, and it will rescue the future of our energy industry and power our country out of the COVID economic crash. The risks are obvious, including the unpredictable impacts of the COVID crisis on labor and material supply, and the more familiar hurdles of regulation and litigation. And TC Energy has a great deal of experience in dealing with risks of that nature. But we believe the timing is as good as it can be for successfully completing the project on time and on budget. The current crisis calls for dramatic action now to create jobs and jolt-line our economy back to life in the future. That's exactly what this project will help us to do. Starting tomorrow, shovels will be in the ground and hiring will begin immediately. This year alone, the project will create, we estimate, 1,400 direct high-paying jobs here in Alberta, 1,200 in Saskatchewan, and 300 elsewhere in Canada for a total of nearly 3,000. The project will generate a further 12,000 indirect jobs, at least in Canada, including 5,400 here in Alberta. These are real jobs, good-paying jobs, right now when they are so desperately needed, that will provide financial security for thousands of Alberta families who would otherwise be unemployed and probably dependent on government support at this time. I want Albertans to know that today's announcement is not in any way a distraction from our focus on the fight against the COVID-19 virus. We've been working on this deal for over 6 months, and it was all but complete before the outbreak of the coronavirus. Construction season starts now, and we cannot afford to lose another season. We cannot afford not to act right now. Too many jobs are at stake. Our post-COVID recovery is at stake. The Canadian and American energy independence is at stake. So today's announcement is a bold declaration of our confidence in the future of our energy industry and the future of Alberta's economy. For years, foreign-funded special interests have campaigned to landlock Canadian energy, and too often they have succeeded. They succeeded in delaying Keystone XL for years. And now OPEC and Putin's Russia are trying to end North America's vital energy industry by surging supply while demand crashes. So today's announcement is Alberta's response to all of them. To the Russians, the Saudis, the special interests who have spent hundreds of millions of dollars campaigning against the responsible development of Canadian energy, our message today is that you will not succeed. We will not allow the world's worst regimes to have a monopoly on global energy markets. We will not surrender to the campaign to landlock Canadian energy. We, as a province, as a people, will do whatever it takes to defend our vital economic interests, and that is why we are making this announcement today. Alberta has endured 5 years of tough economic times, in part because of a lack of market access for our energy. We've allowed others to restrict our freedom to compete, to grow, and to prosper. This investment in Keystone XL is a bold move to retake control of our province's economic destiny and put it firmly in the hands of the owners of the resource. When demand revives, there will be a need for the vast energy resources of Alberta, and there will be a greater need than ever for Alberta to get our energy to markets. We have the third largest reserves on Earth, but there is a very limited future for our industry and the tens of thousands of Canadian jobs that depend on it, actually the hundreds of thousands that depend on it, unless we get new pipelines built. No major investment is going to come back to our energy sector without it, without pipelines. No massive job creation without it, no significant growth, and a very limited economic future without pipelines. This is not just about Alberta. It's about Canada's post-COVID economic recovery as well. The oil and gas sector is by far the largest single contributor to Canada's economy, totaling almost $110 billion and nearly 6% of GDP as recently as 2014. Energy is also the country's largest single employer, accounting for more than 800,000 jobs in 2018, and represents Canada's largest export sector, accounting for 23% of our country's exports. That's why this project is so important. Keystone XL will enable us to ship an additional 830,000 barrels a day to U.S. customers, including the Gulf Coast refineries that process it into various products needed for international and U.S. markets. In a pandemic, you find out who your true friends are. After COVID, Canadians and Americans will remember that the Saudis and Russians tried to exploit our pain for their gain. And we will be resolved to never again allow continental energy independence and security to be challenged in such a way. Let me be blunt. I've always been skeptical about government intervention in the market, but our failure to get pipelines built has been a failure of government policy and politics, not of markets. TC Energy has already invested $6 billion and spent a decade trying to get Keystone XL built. But the project was delayed for years because of a very political U.S. veto and legal tactics by foreign-funded interests trying to landlock our energy. Now the chaos in global energy markets, created in part by Saudi Arabia's predatory dumping, means that the market isn't functioning properly, and there are no prospective private sector bidders of the Keystone XL project at this time. In other words, without this investment by Alberta, the pipeline would not be built. Without this investment by Alberta, I don't believe the pipeline would be built at least any time in the foreseeable future. We also believe that this is our last chance to get a major pipeline project done, and without it, the future of our largest industry will be compromised. The Government of Alberta is confident that this is a wise and prudent investment. After construction is complete, we'll be able to sell our shares at profit, as I've said, and generate additional revenues. Decades ago, one of my predecessors, the late Premier Ernst Manning, made a visionary decision to invest in the development of the Nova gas system in Alberta that created a future for our natural gas industry. And nearly half a century ago, then Premier Peter Lougheed kick-started large-scale oil sands development with an investment on behalf of the government and people of Alberta. Those investments created hundreds of thousands of jobs and generated tens of billions of dollars in tax revenue for Albertans and all Canadians, revenue that paid for schools and hospitals that helped to develop our standard of life. Today's investment will kickstart the oil sands again, protecting hundreds of thousands of jobs in the future and generating billions in tax revenues so that generations of Albertans and Canadians can benefit. Our government was elected with a record mandate to create jobs, get pipelines built, and grow the economy. Today's historic investment keeps that promise. We are going through tough times, but with confidence in ourselves, we will get through these times. This investment is a demonstration of that confidence in ourselves as a people and as a province. So, Russ, let's get her done.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Premier, for your leadership throughout this COVID crisis, but as well your tireless work to build a more prosperous future for all Albertans. Like the Premier, I'd like to start by also expressing my appreciation for all the frontline healthcare workers and all the other essential service workers who are taking personal risk and exposure to get people tested, treated, and cared for, but as well ensuring the critical delivery systems and supply chains that we all depend on every day operate safely and reliably. In addition to those frontline workers, that group of people includes grocery clerks, warehouse workers, truckers, and many other folks, including TC Energy employees who are working hard to ensure that the energy supply to people's homes, to hospitals, and to transportation systems continue uninterrupted. To all of those people, your selfless acts to keep our citizens safe, fed, and comfortable during this difficult time are truly heroic, and we can't thank you enough at TC Energy. I can tell you, Premier, at TC Energy, our priorities will remain centered around maintaining the reliability of our energy delivery systems and the safety of our employees, our contractors, and the communities in which we operate. However, as you pointed out, it is imperative that we keep one eye on the future and the responsibility that our company has to build the critical energy infrastructure that society will need for decades yet to come. So today's announcement marks a significant milestone for the province of Alberta and TC Energy as we move forward in partnership in the construction of the Keystone Pipeline. As Canadians and Albertans, as the Premier pointed out, we're extremely fortunate to be endowed with abundant resources for our use. The Canadian oil sands, as pointed out, are the third largest oil reserve in the world, containing about 176 billion barrels of oil. Access to affordable and reliable energy is a cornerstone of our economic prosperity and the high standard of living that we all enjoy. In fact, again, as the Premier pointed out, Canada has the highest social responsibility, or what is now known as ESG rankings, of all the top 10 countries in the world with large proven reserves. Our opportunity as a province and as a country is to share that resource with others and to become a global energy supplier of choice and to be the most reliable and responsible supplier of that energy to those around the world that need it. Over the last decade, we have been working hard with local communities, listening to key stakeholders to gather feedback on the next steps for the Keystone Pipeline. We've literally had countless, thousands of conversations with landowners, customers, Indigenous peoples, tribes, government officials, unions, and our technical partners. Those conversations were instrumental to our decision to proceed today, and we're proud to have received such strong support from all of those stakeholders along the pipeline route. Keystone XL will play a critical role in connecting the world's third largest oil reserve in the Canadian oil sands to the world's largest refining market in the U.S. Gulf Coast. The project will secure a market for Canadian oil, and at the same time, it will reduce the U.S.'s reliance on oil from nations that don't share their values. The project will enhance continental energy security. It will enhance national security for both Canada and the United States, and it will enhance global security as responsible nations like Canada and the United States become energy suppliers to other nations around the world who need that energy. The project will create tens of thousands of jobs, millions of dollars of tax and other economic benefits for the provinces, states, and the communities it traverses. Those well-paying jobs and benefits will be critical to the economic recovery that will emerge from the COVID crisis as the coming weeks and months come about. Our team has worked hard to develop enhanced standards, new technology, to ensure independent reviews were completed to ensure Keystone XL is one of the safest pipelines that will ever be built. In fact, all of the environmental reviews completed by the U.S. State Department over the past decade have concluded that Keystone XL will lead to lower greenhouse gas emissions and enhanced public safety compared to other modes of transportation. I want to personally thank everyone who contributed to this pivotal decision, but in particular, I would like to thank President Donald Trump and Premier Jason Kenney, as well as many government officials across North America have supported this project for over a decade. Without, Premier, your stalwart support and leadership, this critical and beneficial project could not have been advanced. Premier, your messages on the importance of approving, permitting, and building infrastructure in a responsible manner to bring our Canadian resources to North American markets and to global consumers is on point and is being heard. As we emerge from this pandemic, infrastructure projects like Keystone XL will be critical to creating high-paying jobs for those who need them and economic stimulus for depressed communities. Longer-term, reliable, affordable energy will continue to underpin the North American economy and maintain our enviable standard of living for our citizens for many decades to come. As you point out, these projects are far too important to be held up for any reason. I can assure you, as we move forward to construction, we'll be guided by keeping our workforce and communities safe, and we'll be working with experts, unions, and our contractors to implement all COVID best practices and safety protocols as we get our construction underway. So, Premier, again, thank you, and know we are your partner in delivering what Albertans want and need the most, which is jobs and a strong economy. So again, thank you all in the essential service roles for your efforts and sacrifices as we manage through the COVID pandemic. And in closing, I would ask that everyone please adhere to all government social distancing directives. That is what will keep your family safe and our community safe and contribute to the fastest possible end to the current crisis. So thank you again, and be safe.
quick note to the journalists on the line that only the Premier will be taking questions. Oh, okay. And we're going to limit to
questions on TC's part of this.
Okay. All right. So, operator, can you put through the first caller, please?
First question is Rod Nickel with Reuters. Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, hi, Premier. It's been 10 years since this project was proposed. We're seeing two competitive projects going forward, Trans Mountain and Line 3. The oil sands, of course, we're seeing curtailments and low prices, and the Tex Frontier project has been canceled. In light of all that, what convinces you and TC Energy that this project should still go ahead?
Well, every projection for the Canadian energy sector was that we need significant increase in pipelines to ship our energy. Look, what were we talking about before the COVID crisis? The huge price differential that was created in large part because we had inadequate access to markets. That's why the government of Alberta had to bring in mandatory production curtailment. It's also why tens of billions of dollars of planned capital investment for new projects was shelved, delayed, or cancelled. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers projections are very clear that if we were to have adequate market access, adequate pipelines, that there would be an expansion of upstream production. Now, obviously, we're facing a unique challenge right now with the COVID global recession and the Saudi OPEC Russian price war. But we will get through this. There will be a global economic recovery following the pandemic. There will be a return to global demand, including for energy. It will take a while for the stockpiles of inventories to be drawn down. In other words, it will take a while for prices to come back to something like normal. But inevitably, prices will come back to something like normal. And there will be a growing global demand for energy for decades to come. That is the projection of the International Energy Agency and every expert who looks at this. Even in, by the way, the most bearish scenario for oil consumption, the International Energy Agency in a fully Paris Treaty compliant scenario sees 70 billion barrels of oil being consumed in 2040, down from 100 billion now. So in that world, we think it's essential that Canada, with the highest human rights, labor, and environmental standards, play a significant role in supplying that energy. But we'll only be able to do so with projects like this. Obviously, we are optimistic about the Trans Mountain expansion, but we can't be certain of its completion. And in part, this is one way of ensuring that we do have access, that we do take control of our own destiny.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next question is Robert Tuttle with Bloomberg. Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, hi, Premier. We're wondering, have you actually agreed on a price? You said you'll sell it back at a profit. Have you already agreed on a price? And also, how concerned are you about a change of administration in the U.S.?
Sure.
A new administration that will be against this.
No, we've not agreed on a price, but it's very clear in the negotiations around this transaction about our expectation to sell our preferred shares. We do have a preferred share position. And TC Energy has undertaken to cover any cost overruns. Alberta taxpayers, we think, have reasonable protection against risk. And we do expect that when the project is completed, it will be a very attractive utility that will attract private sector investors once there is no longer any political risk and once we're past the extraordinary disruption in global energy markets that we are currently experiencing. On the question of a prospective change in administration, there's no doubt that one of the reasons that private capital markets were unprepared to come to the table on this project earlier was because of the possibility of a change in American policy. TC Energy has received now its second presidential permit to build the pipeline across the Canada-U.S. border, and today's decision is predicated on that. My understanding is the presumptive Democrat nominee has not expressed opposition to this project. And when Americans go to the polls in November, here's the critical part about today's announcement. They are going to see good blue-collar union workers in the field getting paid good salaries to build this critical infrastructure. And I also think our American friends across the partisan, political, and regional spectrums will see that it's more important now than ever that we protect North American energy independence. As we see this effort by OPEC and Russia to attack our energy industry, to engage in, I believe, predatory dumping of oil on global and North American markets, I think American voters and political leaders will see how critically important this project is to increase the access to this reliable, democratic source of energy.
Operator, can you put through the next caller, please?
Next question is Graham Thompson with iPolitics. Go ahead, Graham.
Hello, Premier. Where's the money coming from? This $1.1 billion. Are you redirecting spending, borrowing? Is this coming from AIMCO? Where's the money coming from?
It's coming from our normal credit instruments, so we will be borrowing because we're already in a deficit position. This is not one dime of this is being redirected from any other area of government spending. So the billion-dollar U.S. equity investment will be financed by Government of Alberta debt. We believe this is a sound investment, that it will end up returning a profit for Albertans when the project is complete and we sell those preferred shares. This is the conventional way that this would be structured. There is no draw on AIMCO. AIMCO's mandate is completely separate. This is an initiative of the Government of Alberta. AIMCO's mandate is to maximize returns for pension holders and in turn for the government through the Heritage Fund.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next question is Claire Theobald, Star Edmonton. Go ahead, Claire.
Hi there, Mr. Premier. I'm going to take you off topic, but I'm going to do so because I think it's worth talking about. Parents of school-age students with disabilities are worried that funding adjustments announced on Saturday that could see thousands of support staff laid off during the COVID crisis, including education assistants, would leave them without support when they need it the most. Advocates warn that without the help of educational assistants, students with disabilities will fall behind. So how will you ensure that students with disabilities and their parents have the support they need during this time of disruption? And, what do you say to those who warn that these cuts come at the great expense of students with disabilities?
Well, the layoffs are the result of the advice of our public health officer to close the schools. That a decision that was announced on March the 16th to close our schools to limit the spread of the coronavirus. Inevitably, that has meant that a large number of people are no longer working in the school system. And so just as people have, unfortunately, been laid off from daycares to the service industry to probably hundreds of thousands of jobs, those positions in the schools have been affected. Much like the municipalities in Alberta yesterday announced thousands of layoffs by employees affected by the public health orders, for example, library employees, recreational facility employees. So unfortunately, certain school board employees are affected in the same way. As you know, we continue to employ teachers to provide online instruction and continue to employ teaching assistants who support children in the PUF program, who are children with disabilities, children with special learning needs. So that support continues to exist for those kids, but we cannot pay to operate buses that are parked or to clean schools every day that are shut down, just as the cities can't pay folks to operate libraries that are shut down for the time being. This is very unfortunate. I don't, however, think it's reasonable to ask people in the private sector who have lost their jobs because of the public health orders to pay for salaries of folks in the public sector who have lost their jobs because of the public health orders. We're all in this together. The government is of both Canada and Alberta are providing extraordinary financial relief to people who have faced layoffs because of the coronavirus, and that includes the emergency isolation payments from Alberta, the expanded employment insurance benefits from Canada, and hundreds of billions of dollars of fiscal support for Canadians as we get through this. The most important thing is and one other thing I think we should point out is that when folks in the public sector who have been laid off because of the coronavirus, when we get in the post-pandemic period, their jobs will still be there. That cannot necessarily be said for a lot of people in the private sector. Today's announcement is about trying to create a broader economic future of economic and financial security for all of those being affected by this downturn.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next caller is Jeff Jones with the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you very much. There are still a number of federal cases against the project and at least one state case in Nebraska having to do with eminent domain. What are the risks that Keystone XL could be stalled or stopped again in these various legal cases?
Well, as I said, there's always some outline regulatory or legal risk. We know that this project has been subject to years of, I would call it lawfare by interest trying to landlock Alberta and Canadian energy. However, in the last couple of years, we've seen TC secure more and more permits. Some matters remain under review, but the position of TC Energy, and I'd invite Russ to state this, is that the project is in a position where it can proceed.
Yeah, Jeff, as the Premier said, we've been methodically working through all of the hurdles that have been placed in front of the project. The specific ones that you mentioned with respect to Nebraska, those issues that are in front of the court are compensation-based. We have been granted easement over those properties. The dispute is over the compensation that we provide those landowners, and we'll work our way through so that won't impede construction. And in Montana, currently, as you know, the presidential permit has been challenged, and there's been a couple of other challenges there as well. Those challenges will be heard in court. Again, we've worked very hard, based on previous challenges to, and these would be the government authorities in the U.S., the State Department, Department of Interior, and the Bureau of Land Management, the Army Corps of Engineers, who have issued those permits. Those permits have been challenged, but our belief is that they've been thoroughly vetted, research been done, and those permits have been issued in a lawful way. So we'll defend ourselves in that court and any other challenges that come about. At the current time, we have all of our permits to start construction. As the Premier said, that's our intent to do that here as soon as possible. In light of COVID, obviously, we'll be very, very careful about how we put people to work and ensure that all protocols are in place with our contractors.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next caller is Elsie Von Scheel with CBC. Go ahead, Elsie.
Hi, Premier. I'm just wondering if you will be asking the federal government to get involved with this project, either financially or with political muscle, if that's needed in the coming months and years.
No, we don't require financial support from the Government of Canada, and we recognize that, and we appreciate the investment that they have made in the Trans Mountain expansion project. As I said to the Prime Minister a couple of months ago when I described to him this investment by Alberta that we announced today, Alberta was going to do its part to do everything possible to get a pipeline built, to get market access. So each level of government is putting some real skin in the game, and I think that shows a real partnership. In terms of, look, we certainly have hope and expect that the federal government will indicate to people across the political spectrum in the United States the importance of this project to the American economy and to North American energy independence and security. That's one of the reasons I was in Washington in early February. I had meetings with congressional leaders, administration leaders, several governors, and top national opinion leaders to walk them through the importance of Keystone XL. And I think the federal government can play a role using its diplomatic offices. Yesterday, I spoke to our newly confirmed ambassador to Washington, Kirsten Hillman, who, by the way, grew up in Alberta, understands this province very well, and she is a strong advocate and supporter for this project. So that's, I think, where the federal government can and will be helpful, which is in communicating that it is clearly in the shared interests of Canada and the United States for this project to proceed and to get done.
Operator, can you please put through the last caller?
Yes, last caller is Stephanie Rousseau with Radio Canada. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Bonjour, Monsieur Kenney. En fait, je me demandais, vous avez dit pendant la conférence de presse qu'il n'y avait pas d'investisseurs privés là, qui voulaient investir dans le projet. Donc, pourquoi avoir pris cette décision-là? Est-ce que vous ne pensez pas que vous faites courir un risque là, aux Albertains en faisant ça?
Le plus grand risque est de ne faire rien. Le plus grand risque est de permettre l'OPEC et la Russie nuit à l'industrie énergétique du Canada et de l'Amérique du Nord. C'est un projet essentiel pour l'avenir de l'économie albertaine et canadienne. Parce qu'on a besoin, évidemment, des oléoducs pour l'exportation de ressources naturelles le plus important au Canada. Ça, c'est le pétrole ici en Alberta. Une des raisons pour lesquelles on a vécu 5 ans d'adversité économique ici était à cause d'un manque des oléoducs, un manque d'accès aux marchés internationaux pour notre énergie. Aujourd'hui est la réponse de l'Alberta. Nous prendrons notre avenir dans nos mains. Ça, c'est une décision d'investir pour permettre la construction de l'oléoduc Keystone XL qui, nous croyons, réalisera un profit pour les contribuables albertains quand nous vendrons nos actions à l'avenir. Alors, nous sommes confiants que c'est un bon investissement, un investissement essentiel et une marque de confiance dans l'avenir de notre économie quand on a besoin d'une telle marque de confiance.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much,
Thank you very much,
everyone.
folks. How's your French, Russ?